Mary Catherine, can you hear us okay? Thank you.
Good to go.
Okay.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Good to see you all again. Thanks for once again taking some time out of your this time Monday afternoon in order to come talk solid waste with us. So this is our fourth and final public meeting, kind of on our schedule for the summer. And so we've covered a lot of ground in our first three meetings, and so the purpose of today is kind of recap some of that. Make sure we've kind of answered everybody's kind of questions, heard from the public. I think we'll have some comments today, and then hopefully land on a second set of recommendations that get folded into what's presented to council on August 4th. And so I would kind of recapping where we started, right? So this came out of the FY26 budget discussions. Our purpose is to provide some input to the city manager, who will then make some recommendations to city council on August 4th related to how the city pays for its solid waste recycling and composting services, as well as any other kind of policy changes that we come up with as part of this process. There's 6 things that we're looking to kind of cover. Some of those are more staff work, and we'll kind of talk about that as we go. But fee structure, how we can provide senior relief, implementation of composting, and then billing, communications, and code amendments that go along with any of those. So there'll be plenty of discussion with council on whether or not this is actually done as part of that process. Kind of our charge is, if the city was going to do this, how would, what are some recommendations on how we would do it? So kind of introductions. I think we're missing a couple of folks on the city staff here today, but I think we've got everybody's kind of departments and functions represented. As I talked about, this is our last meeting. So the final report for the city council work session is due a week from this Wednesday. And then the meeting will be on August 4th at 7:30 p.m. here in the city. If they were able to join us then, that would be awesome. I'm sure council would love to hear from you. So, before we dive into the meat of the meeting, consistent with what we've done in the other sessions, is we want to offer an opportunity for public input. And so I'm going to hand things off to Lonnie Marchetti, who's going to talk about, we've gotten more interest and feedback here over the last 2 weeks. And Lonnie will share a little bit about that, and then we'll see if anybody's with us today who wants to speak.
Okay, so the first comment is by Mr. Sean Dankett at 410 South Maple. His comment is that those residents that produce more trash should pay for more trash. Second comment by Miss Angela Mellon, 215 Forest Drive. This comment was received on June 30th. It was filed wrongly, I apologize. Her comment is based against basing fees off of assessed values or square footage. Residents should be charged the same prices for services. Third comment is by Mr. Michael Chase at 208 South Oak Street. Comment, instead of implementing a variable rate, phase it over 6 months after a third bin has been deployed. This will give residents a chance to see if they're able to downgrade from a 35 gallon from a 65. Give rebates instead of removing the cost difference from the 35 gallon to a 65 gallon, and get more retailers to sell yellow stickers. Miss Miriam Goria, no address given. Consider a weekly and bi-weekly service model and price. Miss Kang Hyam, no address given. Clarification on tax reduction allowed. Thought tax rates were set to 0.5. Are the AVs, shown on previous presentations for 550,000? Are those condos, Winter Hill? Mr. Steve Page, no address given, expressed concerns that there has been a narrow focus on fixing condo owners' solid waste inequities and concerns that will lead to larger problems. Ms. Kang Hyam, I'm sorry, I'm probably messing that last name up, I apologize. Expressed concerns that there has been a narrow my apologies, wrong. Comment seeking more clarification on costs associated with third organics cart. Furthermore, why we need this program when yard waste collection is already provided for. The ESC comment supports the incentivized fee and the third organics cart. Miss Robbie Ramsey, 1134 South Washington. Falls Chase Condos would like to know how their community will be affected regarding how this change. Will services be continued? Will they be eligible for a third cart? Miss Beth Hellam, no address given, protests against any new fees for homeowners for trash collections. Implores the task force, implores not to force homeowners to pay more when they have lost so much or at risk at losing their jobs. Mr. Chris Combs, 211 Nolan, opposed to third organics cart due to smells, rodents, nuisance to dog walkers, and being paid out of curbside residents. Ms. Leslie Rye, no address given, offer variable fee, explain the cost and tax reduction. Ms. Claudia Volk, no address given, continue to offer 35-gallon cart and price the service accordingly. Ms. Rosalie Cosbolt, 531 Great Fall Street, does not support this change in solid waste and believes that it creates hardships and problems, believes that the entire city benefits from sharing the burden, the way that the schools are being funded by everyone, although not everyone has children. Mr. Farley Will, 319 Pennsylvania Avenue, interested to know if adding third organics bin, if the food waste will go into the same cart, and if we do implement, will we provide processed compost like Arlington does? And last and final comment by Mr. David Redman, 116 West George Mason, against the fees for solid waste. We will open it up now to public comment. If there's anyone in the room that would like to make a comment, there is a 3-minute time limit, if you will. Anybody interested in making a comment? Please.
Come on up to the table if you wouldn't mind. Just to make sure everybody hears you.
Yeah, hi, Mark Kawar, 307 Fellows Court. I'd like to speak in support of increased numbers of bins for large families. I have a large family. I have 4 children, and because some of them are young, their grandparents are often with us. It is impossible to fit the amount of trash we produce in a single bin. I would suggest that the number of bins given be proportionate to the number of residents, not a fixed number per address. I would certainly be willing to pay more for additional curbside pickup, but I also don't think I should have to. Because I have a large family, I live in a large house. Because I live in a large house, I pay proportionately more in property taxes. And I believe that that is my contribution to solid waste. And it does not seem fair to me that I'm limited to the same number of bins as a smaller house that pays less in taxes and has a single resident or a smaller family. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Do we have somebody on the
Anyone online interested in making a comment?
Yes. This is Sandy Tarpinian calling. Well, I'm not calling in. I can see everybody. Hi. So I've been following this and I want to thank you all for the hard work that you've put into this. This is not an easy task. Anytime we're trying to get people to change behaviors in what could be a positive environmental way is always a challenge. And I was delighted to hear that more people had actually called or written in, because it seemed like no one was paying attention to this. And I'm sure what's going to happen is those bills are going to come out and people are going to go, what's this? I didn't know about it, because they're not paying attention. Anyway, thank you very much for your hard work. So I have a couple of thoughts on this. You're preaching to the choir with me because I don't even use bins. I use that little green plastic thing for my recycle and bags with orange stickers that are half full and compost crew. My concern are two. If you start using a third bin, I think there's going to be big problems putting food waste in those bins. One of the things that's nice about compost crew is they kind of wash the bin out. And so having to wash out those great big bins is tedious. The other thing about the third bin is that I live on Great Falls Street in townhouses. And we have so many bins out on that street when there is pickup. And a lot of times they don't put the bins back against the curb. And so you've got people, you know, turning the corner from Lee Highway onto Great Falls Street and practically can't make it because of so many bins. So I think adding a third bin in that way is not going to be good at that location anyway. My other concern is I was totally shocked when I realized that what these proposals are at this point is going to require me, because I live in a smaller property and generate very little trash, that I'm going to end up paying more for this than the people that live in more expensive houses and probably generate more trash. So if there's a flat fee for the pickup, why can't there be a flat rebate if you're given tax money back? You know, why does it have to be scaled to people's value of their property? I'm just not getting that. It seems like, you know, we're robbing poor people to pay rich people. I don't know. You know, the federal government is doing that, but I didn't expect Falls Church City to do that. So what is the justification for that? Convince me that it makes sense.
Thank you, Sandy. Anybody else? No public comments. Okay. All right. Well, let's get into it here. So, thank you everybody for showing up, and I think we have made good progress to get the word out. I think thank you all kind of on the task force for helping with that. OCOM's work. We've done a number of new and different things. So I think we've made some progress on that here as the summer has gone on. It's reflected in the amount of participation we've gotten. So we're going to try and touch on each of the components of the task force scope of work that we talked about earlier. Got some input on federal income tax implications. That was one of the questions we got last time. I tried to tee up some of the other public comments you've gotten. Fred teed some of these up for us earlier this week. Gabriella had a couple questions, so we're going to try and cover at least provide a forum to talk about each of those as we get further into the presentation today. And then hopefully kind of land the plane, you know, on meeting number 4 here on kind of where we'd like to go with kind of some recommendations to council. So we'll start with maybe the little background information, and won't dwell on this, but try to kind of recap some things. So, you know, there's around 3,100 homes in the city affected by this. 82% of those are kind of in the homes valued somewhere between $750,000 and $2 million. So next slide. So when we've talked about the different costs for the program, I think this is kind of where we've landed. You know, the city's curbside collection fees that we pay, contract costs for collecting solid waste, recycling, yard waste, the tipping fees that we pay to have those things disposed of, the current compost crew subsidy, our staff costs, and an estimate of overhead administration costs, And then should we kind of move forward with recommending the organics cart, the incremental cost for that. So it's around $1.2 million. So for the fee structure, the kind of guidance we've gotten from legal is, we're paying a fee for a service. It should be based on the cost to provide that service. And any difference in the fees needs to be fairly debatable. And so we've talked about a bunch of different things, right? And so we'll talk through each of these, but a flat fee for everybody, variable fee, based on a different bin size that you have as proxy for how much trash you throw away. An incentivized different fee to try and encourage people to throw away less and go with a smaller bin. And then a fee based on something like the property size, the assessed value is the one we've talked about the most. Next one, so flat fee, the beauty of it is it's simple to administer and it's easy to understand. Everybody gets the same fee for largely the same service. When we talk about a variable fee for different bin sizes, we've tried to look at all the different costs of the program and allocate those that are fixed expenses to kind of all users, and then the variable costs, which is primarily the tipping fees, to the different bin sizes. And so the idea behind this is it's a little closer to kind of how much the service is used, and it provides a reduced cost for properties that throw away less. For the incentivized fees, kind of that one on steroids a little bit. So it's a larger financial incentive to throw away less by choosing a smaller bin. I think as we talked through, and I think Diane, you've kind of brought this up, if you tie that to the composting, stuff to encourage people to compost more, you throw away less, all the puzzle pieces tend to fit together. I think we've talked in here about there's risk of abuse with this, right? More bags and tags, other stuff getting into recycling or different things. And then for FY26, the implementation would need to be whatever everybody has today. We don't really have time for with the tax bills to give everybody a choice to change. That would have to happen next year. So then fees based on property assessed value. We've gotten public comments kind of on both sides of this one. Fred, you've kind of articulated some things. So trying to do some more homework over the last week on kind of how we might think about this, right? And so I think this has been brought up to kind of reduce that financial impact on kind of lower value properties. Talking with the city attorney, she sees some challenges with kind of the proxy of kind of home value to how much the service is being used. And I think one thing we really haven't talked about much, but is brought up with staff is it doesn't really provide an incentive to reduce your trash use, right? And so I think Fred had kind of pointed out, well, Fairfax County does this for leaf collection. And so try to do a little more homework about where that came from. So they established their structure for this in 1994 using the Virginia Code for sanitary districts. They call them leaf districts. And so that's a bigger hurdle. I don't think we would say we can't do that here in the city of Falls Church. I don't think we're going to be able to do that in the city of Falls Church this summer, right? So it's a more involved kind of process, or at least doing what Fairfax County did in this particular case. So provided some links in the deck for folks that want to learn a little more about the kind of chapter of Virginia Code, as well as Fairfax County's latest kind of budget for leaf collection that I thought had some good information. But that's the homework we've done on that, and I wouldn't say it's not possible. It's not possible to do that by August. It's kind of where we're at. So then when we look at the different fees, and this is kind of recapping, so with the $1.2 million program cost, a flat fee is like $385 kind of for each user across the city. And then you can see how that impacts different folks with different property values. The variable fee, this is kind of the simple variable fee with the kind of, I think it's a $35 difference between the smaller bin and the larger bin. And then the next one is the incentivized fee with a $150 difference between the two fees. And you can see how that translates down. So I'll pause there for a second and we can loop back and talk about it more in the presentation, but that's kind of the update and kind of summary we've got on the fee structure conversation. See if anybody has any comments or questions.
Of course.
Please.
On slide 12, where we talk about the fee and throughout the presentation, almost always we talk about it as an annual cost, right? But it's a weekly service. So I think at some point in your report, you should translate this into what it actually means per week. That this is $5, $6, $8 a week in trash collection. It's not just an annual service, it's actually delivered weekly. And I think at some point to put some context on it, it would be good to at least one of your tables to describe what the weekly cost is. That's right.
It's a good suggestion.
The other one is more substantive. It's on 13, where you talk about the variable fee for different bin sizes. As we've gone through this process, I guess I've learned that there's probably a third category, right? And it's maybe the residents of Falls Chase, maybe it's the residents of Winter Hill, maybe it's Ms. Tarpinian who spoke with us, who don't have bins issued by the city, and maybe they may have lower value homes. And this may be a way, without looking at assessed value, it may be a way to provide, a third category, below the 355 rate for those folks, and put those funds that you don't collect into into the higher category, perhaps. But I'm wondering if there might be a third category of service other than 35 gallon and 65 gallon.
Okay. Can you go to slide 33? It was in the appendix. I left one of the slides you put together. There you go.
So if I could just speak on the third category. So for townhome residents that are on the orange sticker program, so we essentially, we give them stickers to essentially make them whole to be able to produce 65 gallons worth of trash. So for example, if you have a 35 gallon bin, we will then supplement you one additional bag of trash that will not fit inside of your city issued bin to essentially equal up to 65 gallons for the entire year. If you decide to have no trash cart, then we will essentially give you 2 bags of trash essentially a week. So either you get 154 stickers or you get 52 stickers. Either way, any way that you kind of look at the pie, it essentially kind of equals up to be the same amount of trash. So when we brought this from being done in-house, and then they brought in contractors to then do the work, I want to say in 2010-ish, 29-ish, 2009. That's essentially when they were looking at it, and townhome communities, spoke up, and, we don't have the space for all of these carts and things of that nature. So that's essentially how the orange sticker system was born. I can't speak too much on the background, as I was not with the city at that time when this program essentially stood up. But that's how the orange stickers kind of go.
So the question along that line is if they don't have the necessary space, maybe they don't have that much trash. And if they don't have that much volume, maybe they should be paying a lower rate than the bin rate. That's what I at least suggest the city look into that question.
Yeah, we could.
I think we'll have to rethink maybe the stickers and how they're allocated a little bit.
Because right now it's an equity issue. Everybody's, paying the same, should get the same. But if you're going to try to promote less trash, right, less volume, then if you have people that are producing less volume, they should get a reward for that, which perhaps is a lower base rate than the people that use more. So just the same concept that you're going between 35 and 65, I suggest maybe there's a group below that 35 bin that should be treated differently, maybe get a lower rate. And that helps us get to the issue of penalizing the, $300,000 condo in Falls Chase. I've been learning more about Falls Chase, with a rate that's the same as someone who has a close to $1 million townhouse. And so anyway, I just raised that as something I think the city would profit from looking at.
So others on the fee before we kind of move on to, and we can come back, we'll definitely come back to it at the end, but. Okay. Just. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you know, it sounds like there's an assumption that folks who live in the lower AV value homes produce less trash. Is this correct? Is this an assumption or is this a fact? Fact thing seems to be a popular topic these days rather than assumptions.
So so as we've talked about it internally, like, you know, you can have a really expensive townhome that's small
Right.
with fewer residents that generates less trash than a bigger home that might have more residents and.
Number of residents, the assumed number of residents in the smaller home versus the value of the home.
So that's when we've kind of talked with the city attorney and she's kind of said, well, like, you know, there's challenges with using assessed value as a
Yardstick.
yardstick for the amount of trash value or the amount that for a
I mean,
trash.
it makes a certain amount of sense that if there's a smaller household, they probably produce less trash. I don't know that. They probably kind of make sense. Don't know that that's true, but yeah, I'm trying to keep it to incentivize people to throw away less trash. Incentive is money. That'll work. I would think that would work. You throw away more, you pay more. You throw away less, you pay less. You don't have a place to put carts, so you can't utilize the city program effectively, then there has to be a third plan. God, what you've gone through to get to 2 plans, never mind add a third in there. I don't even want to think about it.
All right, let's keep going. So senior relief. So kind of tackling this one from a couple different angles, and this one's maybe more or less to just give you all an update. So our treasurer's office kind of did some homework on kind of what the other jurisdictions are doing around senior relief. And this is what we found, right? And this is what I sent out an update this morning. We changed one of them after press release on Friday afternoon. We got some updated information. So we found kind of four of the jurisdictions around us, provide 100% exemption, no matter kind of what they're, as long as they're qualifying for tax relief, they get an exemption from their solid waste fee. So the trick for us next is the mechanism for how they've done that. And so if you go to the next slide, so there's a section in the Virginia code that, articulates how to provide fee exemption. And it's a little weird because it references a different portion of the state code that was repealed. But the way the language is written, it says based only upon the income criteria is provided by 58.1 as in effect on December 31st, 2010. And so we were able to dig up the code that existed in 2010. And so it's, maximum either 75,000 or income limits based on family size using HUD's federal housing assistance. That doesn't seem to be what the other jurisdictions have done. There seems a little simpler than that. And so that's where we're needing to kind of work through either figuring out kind of how Arlington and some of the other jurisdictions have kind of legally set theirs up, or writing some information into our code to be able to follow the rules as we see them kind of with the state of Virginia. So I don't have enough information to determine whether that's going to make an appreciable difference. I don't think we've identified previously, if you followed our tax relief program, there would be 29 of our 3,100 residents that would qualify. Could be a few more, based on the information that's different. We don't really know. Is that a fair way to say it, Nikki?
I think that number 29 is based on the existing program participants. We can't anticipate who is going to apply and qualify in the future. So we would anticipate that number could increase, but that's what it is today.
So a broad question I raised earlier about, this is one of several fees that appear on the tax bill, including stormwater and CDA. And I apologize for EDA. This is when you have a person on your panel that has one functioning ear. Sometimes it doesn't get all the right information in the ear. At any rate, So is the city considering that should be treated the same as trash or different than trash? And what would be the rationale to treat stormwater and CDA fees that apply only to a small group, but to treat those different with respect to seniors than it would a trash fee?
So I believe that stormwater, there's not a legal ability in the state of Virginia for us to exempt folks from that. And that's been looked at previously. And so I don't think we can treat them all the same. And so, so looking at them each individually, like I think the homework, and I can't speak to all the details on the stormwater fee, but I think we've kind of run down that before. This is just kind of where we're at in kind of digging up the code for solid waste fees and what are, what we can tell within the state code of Virginia, that's what we've got to follow. And like I said, it doesn't look like the other jurisdictions mirrors that. And so we're going to try and figure out why. And if we do something simpler, we will, but otherwise we're going to come up with a solution that follows these requirements. Okay. Organics bin. So talked about this a bunch kind of at our last meeting, but as we've looked at kind of goals for rolling out a potential third bin, we talked about simplifying and streamlining this disposal of yard waste in the city. I think, Diane maybe has kind of made this point for us, right? This will make kind of disposing yard waste simpler for a lot of folks. You won't have to have bags and I chopped up a big tree limb that fell in my backyard this weekend and pulled up 6 bags of stuff. And I don't have enough stickers. So now I got to go out to a giant, go buy stickers this week. It's
Knock on your neighbor's doors.
so,
Sticker.
but it's a hassle, right? And one of the advantages of this is I think it'll make that process easier for residents. Provides an opportunity to increase participation in composting, providing that service to everyone. And then, I think through those things helps us work towards meeting our waste reduction and carbon emission reduction goals. So less tonnage sent to waste energy or landfills and reduce truck traffic on city streets.
A question about what
Yeah.
you just said. So you needed 6 yard waste bags. So if we have the organics bin invitation and you have 1 bin, how are you going to put 6 yard bag waste worth of?
You're right. That's more stuff than would fit in the bin.
So, and I'm just saying, because
Yeah.
I weeded my inside of my yard and I had 6 bags. So how do people who have, and maybe it's more of a single family issue than townhomes and things like, or apartments or whatever, but how are you, I mean, to me, that's, what am I gonna do with all that extra yard waste if I can only put it in my little bin?
I think as we've talked about the bags and stickers program, and I think
We'll still
we'll get
continue
that,
that.
we would continue that because this is the first time I've had more than 1 or 2 bags
Okay,
in over a year, right? And so you're absolutely right. People need an outlet to be
so
able to
we'll still
dispose of that extra.
be able to continue that portion of it along with the organics bin.
I think we'll talk about that here in a few minutes, but I think based on our discussion and I think things folks have said previously, that I think that makes sense, right? Okay, so we will kind of go into this. We kind of went through some of these before, but kind of how would it work? Everybody would have would be provided a new bin. We would phase out the compost crew service for the city over time. You would use that bin for both yard waste and food waste. And then American Disposal Services would come around the city every week like they do for trash and recycling and pick that stuff up. The truck's already coming around. It doesn't stop everywhere. So now that's, when we talk about added cost, that's part of the added cost of the city. Tipping fees for composting are cheaper than regular refuse. So we'll save money as we convert more of that over time. And we keep the drop-off program here at the city for other users that are curbside customers. Lonnie's put together kind of a rough timeline for implementation, and we would kind of collect information for, residents and whether they wanted a bin and how big a bin that they would want. Put it in an order for the new bins, and hopefully, if this was adopted in September, we would be targeting to kind of rollout implementation after the first of the year, 2026. So we've had a couple questions, and so we've, just kind of recapping composting costs here in the city today. So today, with the opt-in program through Compost Crew, we have around 580 participants. Each of those participants pays an annual fee, and it's either $96 or $180, depending on the size of their bucket. And then the city subsidizes that with an additional $90,000 for a total program cost of $170. The third organic bin that we've looked at, and went through the details on this earlier, but the total city cost we estimate to be $141,000. So it's actually cheaper overall than the $170 being spent between the city and residents today. The net effect on the city budget, though, was $141 minus the $90 subsidy we pay today for a net increase of $51. And so the breakdown of that's on the next. Go ahead.
So just for clarification, that the program today at $170,000 total cost is serving 580 households.
Correct.
And the projected approach serving for 140,000, serving all 3,000 households.
That's correct.
I want to correct that. I think that program serves everybody, all 3,000 today, if they choose they want to.
So our current yard waste collection provided by American Disposal does not accept food waste at all. So that is strict.
I meant the current composting program. Doesn't that serve, is available to all 3,000 people?
It's available. You must sign up for that program.
Right.
So it's an additional cost.
So it's the same thing, that in the future, it will be available to all 3,000 people who want to do food composting.
In theory, yes.
But it's different in that for those folks to participate today, they have to pay out of pocket additional money.
But they don't pay the full amount.
Correct. It
They
is
don't pay the full
subsidized.
cost of it.
Correct. So in the future, should the city implement the third bin, nobody would have to pay any extra out of pocket at all. It would all be included in the.
Because the 3,000 people are bearing the total cost of it,
Correct.
whether they use it or not.
Correct. So, real quick on, so we've estimated the program to be 141,000, which is equivalent to $45 a year per 3,107, customers. 36,000 of that is for the purchase of the bins that would be spread over 5 years. And so then less the subsidy, it's really equivalent to $16 a year, if once the subsidy is kind of factored in. So, kind of botched the explanation of that. Has anybody got any questions on compost costs while we're here?
Just one other question. One of the things that came up with Arlington was about a caddy, to take this trash from your kitchen to compost, that you don't want, you're not gonna do that every night as you cook, right? So is there any thought about that being a part of this service, or is there any discussion about how that would happen?
So we haven't factored in an estimated cost to provide something like that to everybody. That's not currently in the estimate. Right.
However, we did do that back in 2016, 2017, when we were trying to promote just the farmers market drop off. So we bought a bunch of kitchen caddies. So a lot of residents that currently participate in this program as an opt-in, they do have that. We could look into it.
Yeah, I think, if you all have that kind of feedback for us, I think it could. I try to think about it as that's another cost, and we're trying to kind of manage keeping the program costs down, and so it's a balance on that one.
I would just say very tactically that we started with one of those caddies and we found another solution that works a lot better and it's really cheap. So anyway, we can always get creative and share FAQs about these are 2 little nesting bins. They work great, and things like
I
that.
use that 32-ounce yogurt container that
There you
has a
go.
lid.
Yeah.
And
Stuff
that
like
be
that.
eating the yogurt.
Yep.
Every
Yep.
day.
Exactly.
I mean,
It doesn't necessarily have to be fancy.
No.
The purpose of the kitchen caddy is to essentially kind of signal you as you're cooking, as you're throwing things away. It's in the kitchen and has a designated area. So again, it's that behavior change. You see it, you're like, oops, I didn't feed my compost bin today. And then, you find things to put in it, essentially.
So should we decide to kind of move forward with the program, I think there's opportunity for some creative marketing and education and, we've got a good base of users in the city that do this already, right? And being
I'm
able
all
to
for
teach.
not forcing everybody to do exactly the same thing, exactly the same way. So if there's other solutions people have come up with, it sounds like there are, then that's probably what needs to be communicated part of the education program.
I purchased a caddy for $15 from home. It sits right next to my sink in the kitchen. And as I cook, it all goes in there.
All right. Gabriella, back to your question about the stickers, right? So, the system in place today, the yellow stickers are $1 a piece. We implemented that back in 2005. City sold a little over 27,000 yellow stickers in fiscal year 2025. And, I think from a consideration standpoint, staff recommends keeping them, right? For the example we talked about earlier. We do expect that we'll sell less yellow stickers should we implement a third bin for, yard waste and organics. And then should the cost of the stickers be raised, right? And I think that's one of the things we've talked a little bit about in the previous meeting. Does $1 a piece drive the right incentives and match kind of everything else that we're doing here today, right? Open question. So.
Just thinking about that cost of the stickers being raised. I think the burden then falls on the family, the homeowners, because we have more yard waste. And to raise that as well as the other fees for the garbage, I don't know if that to me makes sense. I don't see it as an incentive to compost. I mean, I get it. I think that, I guess it does make sense. I mean, I compost as much as I can, but I still need those targets because I have tons of trees. So, and I can only compost so many.
Sorry. I have a larger question,
Sure.
which is, if we my understanding is we're considering setting this up as an enterprise fund, if I understand that correctly.
Eventually,
Okay,
yes.
so that would take some time. I would just be curious if that any revenue from the stickers would flow into that enterprise fund and help offset costs.
I think it should, right?
Okay.
Like, I don't know today, Lonnie, it's not direct.
Okay.
It's more indirect today, right? Like, but I think absolutely, like, what we talked about for FY 26 is keeping it what we call a virtual fund. So
Right.
kind of off books tracking of kind of costs and revenue and like, but that would definitely be something I think we would address, in an enterprise fund situation.
And then I would also be curious, because this is the first time we've talked about this, so we don't really have data on what other jurisdictions do, if they do something similar. Like, I just don't know what their costs are. Again, I think we've heard a decent amount of support for pay as you throw, and there's other evidence of pay as you throw kind of working in various ways with other jurisdictions. To your point, where anytime you have a yard, there's going to be a certain amount that comes out of it, and that just kind of is what it is. But I don't know if we're equipped to make a great recommendation on raising the cost of stickers, but I think it's a really good point for consideration, even if it's not something that we suggest.
Just
With this, yeah,
single family homeowners it looks like we're gonna be paying for our trash pickup, and then you're gonna add.
That's another thing, right?
And then
Yeah.
there's so many changes that I feel like it's gonna really shock the system of City Hall Church. I just think we need to be careful. And I am a single family homeowner, so of course, that's why I'm thinking of that, like, I don't think I can, I have one of the big compost bins, I have the big one, and that is full every week. Every week, it is full to the top. So, and I don't even put leaves in there, I use the yard waste, and like I said, I don't know how people with yards. I think, yes, people will reduce trash, but I don't think that's gonna affect the homeowners who tend to, I may be totally off base. I think homeowners, single family homeowners are using more of that for their yard waste than condo and apartment and home people. And I may be wrong. I know, I'm just thinking this. It's just the amount of land and trees we have on.
Let's keep going.
I think there was a couple hands up and.
If you go with a third bin, make it distinctive in color. It doesn't have to be like electric yellow, but my neighbor who was low vision had no end of problems telling green from gray, to the point where I put a big blue piece of paper on the top of one. This one's the trash, but he honestly couldn't tell the difference between the two.
It's fantastic you brought that up. So, and you know, our gray bin is our trash, our
Even
gray
my
bin.
husband, I did the gray one.
So there are many different colors that we can essentially choose from for this third organic
No
bin.
doubt.
And I was leaning more towards brown or yellow to make it very in your face. This is your organic spend.
Yellow
We
was just
have it.
nasty after a first month.
Yeah, so that's why I was more thinking brown, and you can kind of think of dirt that way, but
Blue could be an option. That's what Arlington does.
I feel like it would just be very confusing, even though there would be wording on it, you know, this is your recycling, this is your, I'm trying to make that true distinction
Yeah.
away from each other, yeah.
So
Yeah, I was just gonna throw in there, I agree, maybe not changing the sticker price now, if there's a lot of change going on, but I do, and I agree with you for yard waste, but I do think we should charge more for non-organic waste. Like, we're a big family of 6, we tend to entertain a lot, we clean out things, and we will put out, once in a while, we'll put out one of those big contractor bags full of stuff that can't be recycled or whatever, and it's just $1, you know, and so that might be something in the future to think about, you know, for non-organic waste. Maybe it's $5 a bag or something. I mean, and we'd be happy to pay for that. You know, we're, you know, it is like the city's hauling away junk that we would have to have paid, you know what I mean, to a hauler to pay away that we can't get rid of in another way. Like broken, you know, stuff, whatever it is.
Well, building on that comment, it sounds like all of the discussion thus far has been talking about waste limits per property. Has there been any discussion up to this point about waste limits per resident? So that properties with a larger number of residents get a larger allotment than similar properties with fewer residents?
I think the challenge becomes the city's ability to track that kind of information. We don't know specifically how many individuals live in a particular property in the city. So,
Well, some sort of program to give yellow stickers, to give extra stickers by the resident.
that people would apply for, or
Yes.
it's something I think we could consider. If you know, you start talking about standing up a whole separate kind of system and program to do something like that, you know, I think we'd have to kind of think through how that fits with, you know, the other elements of the program we're trying to sell.
It just seems very anti-family to me that 2 houses next to each other, 1 resident, 6 residents get the same allotment.
I understand your point.
But if it becomes too technically demanding, people won't participate. That defeats the whole purpose. They'll be just like, yeah, whatever I've been doing, that's what I'm gonna keep doing. I don't want any of this new stuff. I have to read the directions about what to put where.
We're talking about giving rebate for seniors, but not the families.
Right.
I imagine that has some technical limitations to it as
I
well.
might say that senior thing, because I did some research, they have to be very low income.
Yeah.
This is more of a charity situation than just old people like myself. It's really aimed at helping people who are barely able to make it, you know, make $70,000 a year or something. It's very low income. And there are other criteria other than just being a senior in order to qualify for that program. It's not just age. Just, you know, I didn't know that, so I'm just sharing.
So let's bang through these last couple pieces and then we'll loop back to some of the questions and things that we've been getting. So, so billing, you know, we've looked at a couple different options. I think we're back where we started and gonna follow, you know, I intend to follow through on the real estate tax bill as our solution. And the treasurer's office has been working with Tyler Technologies, which provides our IT system for that. we have to meet the November 1st deadline for issuing property tax bills. So, getting through all the decisions and details of what we decide on to support that date is a must do, right? And so I think that's coming together. Communications. So we talked earlier, we've kind of done a number of different things. I don't know, Maggie, did you want to kind of speak to this real quick, or Mary Catherine, you're online, or, I can do a quick summary, but.
Absolutely. Thank you, Andy. Thanks, Maggie. We did use all of the mediums available to us through digital means throughout the summer to communicate out with residents. So paid, earned, and owned channels. We did put out yard signs in wonderfully public places and received engagement from that as well. We do know from the letters that people have sent in, those who've shown up, as well as the engagement of media relations where we've had newspapers cover ones that we know our residents read, that we have been able to reach some of the public. It has been summertime, and so it's an interesting time for engagement, but it is just the start of what we will communicate with the public depending on the outcomes that we receive.
I know several of you have been kind of working your channels to kind of push this in different newsletters and neighborhood groups and things throughout the city. So I think that's had a really positive effect as well. So appreciate your all's help with that. And then, we'll have a whole set of kind of communication strategies, when we get ready to implement whatever's decided in the fall. Code updates. We've started some work on this. If anybody's super interested in the city's solid waste code, there's a link there to chapter 34. Light reading. So we've got a few edits started, and we'll finish these kind of this week based on kind of how the discussion goes today, and have all of that included in a draft ordinance for council to consider on August 4th.
Andy, going back to communications, one thing that I often find useful, because as good as all the articles and websites and the decks are, is people really want the digest, like the FAQs. And so I think the task force could be really helpful. And like, here are the top 10 questions we field, and just have those as your bullet point answers, rather than here's the 3 decks and 2 news articles and all the deep versions. People have that available as well, but I think an FAQ would be helpful.
Suggestion. Thank you. Taxes. All right. So, one public comment we had in the last meeting. So I tried to do some homework on kind of what's going on with the state and local tax deduction at the federal level. So the question we got was, hey, will shifting costs for solid waste from general taxes to a fee have implications for folks' federal taxes? For some folks, the answer to that is yes, right? And so solid waste fees are not a deductible expense for federal tax filing. One of those links down there will provide that answer for you. But it's super specific on, individual specific situations, right? Whether, when it's their income level, marginal tax rate, what they itemize for their deductions, if they itemize at all. And so the table down below talks a little bit about kind of how many people itemize their taxes. And so in 2017, prior to the SALT deduction cap that went into place, 31% of federal taxpayers itemized their deductions. And you could see the standard deduction was pretty low. And so 2 things happened in 2017. They instituted a SALT cap, and they increased the standard deduction. And so as 2020 as an example, the deduction cap was $10,000, and the standard deduction was almost double what it was in 2017. And therefore only 9% of federal taxpayers itemized their deductions. What's going to happen in 2025? We don't really know, right? So the deduction cap is higher, the standard deduction is also higher. And then trying to figure that out for the city of Falls Church, our 3,107 customers, we don't have the information to be able to do that. So the next slide kind of goes through like, okay, if somebody that had the median assessed value home in the city was paying a flat fee, got the 1.8 cent tax reduction. So their net impact on their, is $178 more they would pay in that particular year. And then there's 3 different income tax thresholds and the marginal tax rate for each of them. So it could give you an idea of what the tax bill kind of implications of that would be. And it's somewhere between $40 and $62, right? A lot of assumptions that go into that, and we are not tax professionals, and so I don't know, but it gives you an idea of kind of the scale of what this looks like for people should they have a medium, value home and they itemize their taxes. This is what it could look like.
If I could just comment, I'm really appreciative of, just the additional research and looking into that issue. And I looked into it quite a bit. I think what was very helpful for me personally was seeing, again, we don't know what exactly will happen, but it tends to be that fewer folks itemize, and those who itemize tend to have significantly higher incomes. So I'm less concerned about that from an equity standpoint. Again, that's one of our huge drivers on this. And so if you're, looking at your scenarios there and it's costing $1 or so a week, but it's a higher income situation, it's like, okay, change, things change and there are small effects and you can't control everything. So that's just my take on this issue.
So just a couple of things. One is, before the passage of the One Big Beautiful Bill, this only affected the homeowners with houses of $850,000 or less in the city. Because anybody with a house more expensive was already capped at $10,000 taxes, okay? So it has already affected people, and which is one of the concerns, I think we've all had is, let's look at the people who have the smaller houses and seem to have a higher, more out-of-pocket cost here and see what we can do to address that. So I think that's consistent with the concerns that we had, because they are getting a hit, but it might not be great. If they're at the 25% tax level, it might be $20 or $40. It may not be massive. On the other hand, yes, the new bill does make this taxable impact your deductions. But I worked through your example here, but the one in the $1.15 million house, you get an additional $3,800 in deductions to offset this $57 cost, right? And even with a tax rate, we're talking about $1,300 for income to offset your $62. So this isn't done by the city. This is an impact of the federal tax law. And just to your point, I don't think we should shed too many tears, because yes, they are losing the ability to deduct $60, but they're also gaining thousands of dollars.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing all.
Yes.
And then we tried to kind of tee up some of the, this isn't quite kind of the mayor's suggestion on FAQs, but it's in the spirit of that. I think it's maybe a starting point that we could work on to develop that. But there were some of the public comments we got, right? So we can read through these, and some of them are more maybe for you all to kind of weigh in on than kind of us as staff. But I think it's my understanding that the city's paid for the recycling that it collects. And so what happens is, so years ago, the city used to get a net check for the amount of kind of recycling that it turned in. We used to get paid for it because there was a market, and the value of that was such that recycling paid for itself, I think, and then some, right? Now the cost to collect and deliver recycling exceeds what we get reimbursed for it. So we're not actually getting paid anything for recycling today.
We are paying to recycle.
So it's fair to give developers further profit in the form of a windfall on their taxes. I think, as we've talked about this before, any tax reduction that's being considered is going to be applied to everybody. That's kind of how the city's real estate taxes work. These are established for solid waste collection. Should parents pay for kids to go to school? And I think what the distinction is, schools are available to everyone. Solid waste services, the current solid waste services are not. And then public sanitation is a public good and all should pay for it. I think this is the piece we've talked a little bit about leaf collection and how leaf collection benefits kind of others in a way that, you know, trash collection, everybody's got to handle it one way or the other. And then we're just talking about a subset of the city as part of this process. Charging extra for composting discourages this activity, plus there needs to be ways to make it easier and less icky. So I think I would agree with the make it easier and less icky, and I think that's part of what the lift will have from a communication and education standpoint as we move forward. Should we move forward with this in the fall? But what we're talking about is nobody's going to pay an extra fee for this. It's part of the base level service that's provided to everybody. Concern about trash bags and stickers. I think we've talked about that one already. Can this be handled as a referendum in November? I think Gabriella and I've talked a little bit about this one. So referendums in the state of Virginia are only permitted or explicitly authorized by statute. The only referendums done in the city of Falls Church, I think in the last 20 years, have been for bond issuance for public projects. All that said, the city charter does allow for advisory referendums, and it's in section 4.12 of the city code. If you want to check it out, it's not super clear. But so I don't want to sit here and say it's not possible, right? Like, you know, it is, but it hadn't really been. It would be something different for the city stuff than what we've kind of done in recent history. And then the last one, why not start handling the trash service for condos? I think as we've gone through this with the different buildings and properties in the city, they're all kind of set up a little differently. So the complexity of adding that into the city services is a hurdle for us. And I think trying to draw the line on which properties in the city you would do and not becomes very complicated. The other one that we haven't talked about quite as much is that's all added cost to the city. That's a service we're not paying today. So for us to do that, we're in effect going to have to raise everybody's taxes to be able to do that. And so, yeah, I'm happy to talk about that one further, but those are the kind of two kind of ends of that one that we've kind of kicked around that make kind of go in that direction. It's a little more difficult. And so, happy to talk about any of those items. Any other questions y'all have, or then kind of loop back to kind of, well, now what do we want to do, right?
I'll just mention one thing. Going way down the solid waste rabbit hole, I've never read the entire Falls Church solid waste plan. Sorry. But I did this week, and I did read the entire Fairfax City solid waste plan. And one of the things that they bemoan is that because they have basically no rules, they pick up everything anybody puts out. They don't make any division of whether it's compostable or non-compostable or yard waste, or even though they tell people not to put out remodeling stuff, it can be remodeling stuff. They pick it all up. They're just introducing trash cans for the first time in September, trash baskets. Right now, anybody supplies their own metal trash can like we used to do 50 years ago. So there's basically no system there. And buried deep in that report is the comment that without any kind of trash fees, without any kind of structure, it's really hard to get people to change any behavior or to control behavior or to get anything responsible to happen in terms of composting, in terms of less trash, in terms of anything. It's a put it all out, pick it all up system. And they, even though they're trying to put together a plan, it's like, how do we put together a plan when the whole system is uncontrollable, unmanageable, and unmonitored? So just putting a fee in place of some kind does give the city the chance to manage and operate in a way, in a level more discipline than has occurred.
Right. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say that, you know, again, I'm super appreciative of all the analysis that you all have put into this and all of the background. And I really appreciate, it's been so great to hear from everybody writing in. And I've had, you know, neighbors and friends approach me as I know you have as well, you have as well. So it's been great to, you know, we're starting to get through and to get people's attention. I do think that what seems the fairest to me personally is the variable fee, but just the simple variable fee, not the one with the incentive. I think the simple variable fee speaks to going in the direction of a pay-as-you-throw method, because it does give a slight, actual cost reduction to the 35-gallon trash carts versus the 65. And I think it's it's a small but incremental, important step towards getting people to think about behavior a little bit more and pushing people towards, towards organics and, just being a little bit more thoughtful about it. So, again, that's just where I've landed after all of these discussions and conversation. Certainly, I'm very strongly supportive of including the organic spin. I'll just reiterate for anyone who didn't hear, when the Arlington rep spoke to us last week or 2 weeks ago, he confirmed that 90% of their folks and their citizens in Arlington do use the organic spin. So I thought it was great that, people are using it. Most people use it for yard waste, and it's in the 20% range for compost. So that's similar to where we are today, but at least everyone's getting value out of that. It does cut down on some of the annoyance of having to get the yard waste bags. We'll still have to do it somewhat, but it cuts down on that. It helps out. So anyway, that's just kind of, just some of my thoughts after all these.
Right, Gabrielle?
I mean, I would agree, basically, I think, I do question whether there might be a third tier, for the below the 32-gallon bin. But respective of that, a base rate with extra cost if you over consume, plus the ability to encourage you to send your trash down different lines, the organics one way, the other rubbish a different way. That's sort of what I think was before you came out. The objective wasn't fee. Fee got raised in the discussion, but the real objective was how do we manage this better? And I think those things really lead to better management of the whole system.
As we think through kind of what we would do for recommendations, so the senior relief I talked about, like it's largely kind of in our court as staff to figure out what legally we're allowed to do in the spirit of kind of what we've talked about. I think we're limited to, I think as Fred was articulating earlier, a senior relief, but only senior relief for specific kind of financial situations. It's in the ballpark of 29 out of our 3,100, participants today. So it's pretty limited. Billing is kind of our process to figure out. I think, like I said, we're real estate bills, I think the direction we're going. Communications is kind of an implement where I think we've kind of, with everybody's help, done a good job kind of communicating the task force. And so now we would shift into articulating our plan for implementation. I think Lonnie's got some good thoughts kind of from the program standpoint, as well as kind of OCOM getting the word out. And I see visions of kind of Falls Church TV videos and lots of really stuff. And then code amendments is kind of the nuts and bolts of kind of legally, the things that we need to do to kind of implement what we've talked about. So I think I've heard, Mayor, go ahead.
Have you all talked about for composting, task force? I would love your recommendations on whether you would make it opt-in or opt-out. Would you kind of offer all 3,000 people the bin and then a chance to not take the bin, or we only give it to people who want it?
I mean, my understanding is that we would make it available to everyone.
And you could say just no, thank you, but we wouldn't.
You could say no, thank you, right? Just like you can today with the trash cans. Yeah.
Is there any discussion of encouraging people to compost on site? For yard scraps in their own yard instead of having them taken away?
So our city code does allow you to compost on your own property. For many, many years, we did offer backyard composting. However, our master gardener, we are yet to find another master gardener to essentially help us with that, but it is highly encouraged. We start you off with a starter backyard composter setup. I mean, it was a very well attended program.
It seems like that could be even more environmentally friendly than having your compost trucked away.
The problem,
Giving people bins to just put it in their own yard.
Agreed. But it's, again, until we find another master gardener, that program is essentially on hold for now.
I was one of the converts years ago from the city program, so thank you. We've been doing it for like 6-8 years.
It's a
It's a great program. We moved to something bigger. Second question on composting. For Winter Hill, so I'm sensitive to obviously our townhome communities not having as much space. Did you all talk about how to address that for the townhome communities where they may not have space for a third bin?
So what was really helpful was hearing, and I can't remember if it was Arlington or if it was American Disposal. And maybe it was, but it might have been the Arlington rep, where he was talking about how a number of folks ended up sharing bins in some of their more community, right? And so neighbors would just, kind of agree to say like, we're just gonna share this yard waste bin. So that was the best idea that we had heard of.
Yeah, like in Winter Hill, I was thinking like each cluster could probably have a couple that you would share rather than try to give one to every.
Yeah, I mean, we could offer it and then folks could just decide to coordinate.
That's probably one of the things I would anticipate, because as I'm in the community, I'm hearing from the townhomes are like, I like the idea of composting. I don't have a place for this third thing. So if we can anticipate needing some sort of communal option that American Disposal can also pick up, that will make implementation easier.
I will say too, that the 35-gallon cart does have, it's a smaller footprint for sure than the 65. It's not that much bigger than if you have a compost bin today. It takes up like a little bit more room, but it's not terrible. Yeah, so that will help to have that option.
Great. Glad you all talked about it.
The 12-gallon, yeah.
I think we've had a number of discussions kind of on the staff side too about, I think Lonnie's been, the opt-in advocate. I've been the kind of like, let's have everybody opt out. I think I'm getting converted, right? I think thinking through, the logistics of it so we don't end up, having a lot of extra bins that we got to go back and collect or other folks. So I think we'll here over the next week kind of sketch out some recommendations that will come to council on that.
Is it less costly to empty the bags? They always turn into bombs on me. The bottom gets wet, the guys go to pick them up and half of it goes out there. They've got the big shovel and they're shoveling and I'm like, sorry, can't do anything about it. I could put a plastic bag around it that defeats the whole purpose. Is it cheaper to empty a cart than it is to pick up the bomb bags and throw them and whatever falls out into the back of the truck? Does it make any difference at all?
Well, the American Disposal Services rep describes how if we have the 35-gallon or 65-gallon cart, then they can use their lifter to empty it. So that will help a lot. And then the bottom won't rot out, obviously.
The guys I live on Nolan Street, I don't think I've ever seen them use a lifter. I look at all these people in their 20s and I'm like,
You referring to the compost people?
no, the back people who have the carts. Where we let-
Oh, really? Okay.
But yeah, I just look at a bunch of 20-year-olds and I'm like, I want to see your x-ray when you're 50.
Transfer it, lift it, so they lift it.
Stop doing that. You'll pay for it. And I hate those bags. Oh, just hate them. They're always bags. No matter how carefully I try to put things nice and loosey-goosey down at the bottom so it won't rip and so it'll be elevated and then they fall in.
I just use my own can, no bags.
Other thoughts? Like, so I'm hearing it.
Do you all have communal compost for pickup? That was one of the public comments council received a week ago. Is if you do this, is there going to be communal compost that people could pick up, like the leaf mulch?
So that is something that we can look into. I think our biggest hurdle that we would potentially come with is space limitations. So right now, we're still in leaf mulch season, and we still have a decent amount to get rid of that. So we would essentially have to figure out some type of a timeline as to when we can kind of switch over. But they're both, people would want them in the spring.
We have a hard time getting rid of all the leaf compost. Yeah, right. So, I think it's something we'd look into. I don't think we have an answer to.
People could just leave their leaves.
Depends on how many trees you have.
You can leave some of the leaves. Leave some of them. That's my little asterisk on the market.
Me too.
Well, I'd like to thank you for the way you run these meetings. I felt like you solicited, accepted, and been very gracious to all of us for all of our comments. And all times we were the ignorant public. So I thank you for the way you run the thing.
It's been
Here.
Great team effort, right? We've had a lot of good contributions from everybody here on the staff as well as kind of you all and great community participation. I think we turned out today, like we made some really good progress kind of over the course of the summer. I'm hearing like, I think, you know, a variable fee, a simple variable fee, and the organic spin kind of implementation. Few follow-up items, you know, anything else that we haven't covered? I think that gives us what we need to work with. Debbie?
I apologize, I had another meeting, I was here late. Did you have an opportunity to review the Environmental Sustainability Council's letter? We discussed it at length on Thursday night's meeting.
Yes, it was read in the beginning.
So we mentioned, well, we didn't read the whole letter, but I think we mentioned that we've shared it with the group kind of in the write-ups. I think their main points were wanting an incentivized fee to encourage folks to throw away less and the organics card.
Yeah.
So I think
Throw away less, compost more. As much as people feel comfortable in scenting that.
Is part of the, in the organics, fee, you know, implementation stuff, is that going to include education? Okay, that's where that's coming from.
So when the carts are being delivered, it will actually include 3 pieces of outreach material. What we decide to put in it, you know, we can obviously take some questions from these meetings, like a Q&A, as the mayor suggested, but it will definitely explain the program as best as we possibly can, answer some Q&A, you know, maybe some, you know, ways to get rid of the ick factor, things of that nature. So everybody that gets a bid will have that material with it.
Is there any thought of having something like a farmer's market where people could come and talk to you? Because, and I'm just thinking, like, even with recycling now, a lot of people really do not do recycling correctly. And we've had that.
No idea.
Yeah, I do, like, I walk down my street going to work every day and I'm like, why are we putting plastic? That's been putting plastic here. So, I mean, I think the education has to continue, even just like with recycling. And I'm just wondering, some people might, you know, read it and be like, oh, okay, and still not quite understand it and may want to reach out. Whether we had like little composting task force, you know, in the little neighborhoods or, you know, I don't know, but I'm just
Could be a tie into the Environmental Sustainability Club at the high school too. A lot of the high schoolers who are learning how to work on their presentation skills, communication skills, and are really knowledgeable. And there's a certification you can get in the high school now if you've done a certain amount of volunteer hours and the environmental landscape. That might be a good source of, you know, so Lonnie's not at every farmer's market, but they could have a rotating cast of high schoolers who are, I love it, pretty well educated. And
peers listen to peers, so.
yeah.
It's a great idea.
So one of the things that I believe I mentioned prior, so with the farmers market, we used to host them every single weekend, especially when we were trying to get the composting program up and running. The major problem that we found was that we were reaching residents that were not taxpayers.
You had mentioned that.
Yes.
So I threw out the farmer's market, but maybe a once a month, you know, community meeting or, you know, the community center. So it doesn't have to be farmer's market. I'm just thinking of something ongoing that people who want to talk to someone who might not have the expertise and are thinking they might want to try it, but then they get kind of like.
Yes, you talked about doing it at the fall festival or something.
Yeah,
brand,
fall
you know, fall
Yeah.
festival, like.
So we have talked about the fall festival, yeah. I mean, there's definitely places that we can staff, you know, that fall festival being one, getting multiple different outreach materials printed and created. I mean, the world is our oyster. We can do whatever we want to do to get the point across. So we're still building on that currently, so. You think about it.
I think the main thing I took away from the Arlington County and ADS, you know, discussion was like, it's important. Like a lot of different outreach and education and communication with folks will be really important for adoption and kind of participation in the program. And I think we'll blow away Arlington's participation. I'm super optimistic. We
Me
can do
too.
this stuff.
Get ready, Arlington.
Other thoughts? Anything else we haven't covered? Questions or suggestions? things that we should think about. Okay. Question about a referendum. So we kind of talked about that earlier. So, you know, I don't want to say it's not possible. It's not something, these are not the kind of things that we've used referendums for in the city in the past. That's more of a council question. I think that some folks can bring up in August, but there's pretty limited kind of rules in the state of Virginia on what can go to a referendum. Although there is a statement in the city code that we have the ability to do advisory referendums or whatever that is. So,
There's another question, Andy. Why is this discussion? Why are we doing it in the summer?
like this, so why is this happening in the summer? So I think that you know, this was kind of brought up during the budget discussion with council this spring, and you know, I think staff, we've asked for some additional time, and I think there was a good suggestion to kind of put together this task force to have more kind of public discussion and some more time to do some homework on how to implement a program like this. And I think so that's, but we still wanted to affect the tax rate for folks in FY26, which is the November tax bill that's going to come in. So purpose of doing this now is to kind of get through that process to still affect the tax bills for residents in FY26.
Another thing that would be really helpful for the task force, because this is a very complex issue, is maybe like what's the top line elevator speech? Because I've heard various versions of like, oh my God, you're just charging me a new fee. And we're like, actually, it would be a commensurate like tax rate decrease, and explaining that it is both a fairness issue as well as a like solid waste climate issue of how to divert less trash. Like having more succinct, you know, 2-sentence version of this would be helpful, because most people, again, may not even get to the FAQs. But I found that just out in the, you know, whether it's the parent listservs or other places, people need that quick soundbite of what it is that we're trying to do. And so to the extent that staff or the task force help distill it into that elevator speech, I think that would help, again, make it more digestible for people.
Good suggestion. Okay. All right. Well, want to thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedules to spend some time with us this summer. Hope you'll all be able to kind of join the City Council work session on Monday, August 4th. We'll be putting together materials for a presentation of that meeting here over the next 2 weeks, and we'll make sure you all get a copy of those, reflect kind of what we talked about here today. And it's not quite as hot and humid out today, so everybody enjoy the beautiful summer weather and enjoy the rest of your summer. We appreciate your help.
Thank you. Thank you to Angie and the task force and all the staff. Thank you all.
Never know what can go in.
The one for trash.